How's it going, guys? Casey here with the Coyote Works channel. Well, it is Friday, and in the midst of all this mayhem surrounding the coronavirus and all that madness and insanity, I am jumping in the Jeep and bugging out for the weekend. And one of the things I'm doing is I'm actually treating this like an actual bug out. So follow along with me in this video as I kind of show you guys how I am prepared or am not prepared for a situation like this, and explore what it looks like to actually bug out of town to get away from a virus like this. So I like to do kind of a mock bug out trip a couple of times a year, kind of in every season. So this trip will be about kind of testing my state of readiness as far as my vehicle-borne bug out kit. I'm basically just leaving the office with whatever's in my Jeep. So different than a normal camping trip where perhaps I stop by the store, where I have an ice chest, where I have ice, where I have some perishable food items, some things like that. For this trip, all I have is whatever is currently packed in my Jeep. So in this case, this is an interesting exercise because there actually is a virus pandemic going on in our country. And although there's not an immediate risk or an immediate danger to me personally from the virus, there are some pretty serious things happening in society which are resulting in some fairly uncertain circumstances. This virus is a rapidly developing situation. There's daily news and advice coming out, executive orders coming out from the president, from the state of Oregon governor's office. So in this situation of a virus like this, where it's being spread from person to person, getting out into the woods could actually be one of the safest places you could be for a period of time. So one of the questions I think is interesting to wrestle with is, how different is the set of gear, equipment, and supplies that I use for my normal overland exploring adventures? How different is that from the gear and supplies and everything that I would want to have if I were bugging out in my vehicle? I've always looked at the two as being very much the same. Most of the kit that I want to be comfortable for a couple of days worth of exploring is the same basic kit that I would want to be comfortable for an indefinite period of time in a bug out situation. So one of my first priorities when it comes to the idea of bugging out in a vehicle is going to be determining a location. This is something that I believe strongly you should have determined ahead of time, right? Like, the time to decide where you're going to bug out to isn't when you're being forced to bug out. So in my mind, the whole purpose of this bug out is to get away from people who represent, for a variety of reasons, various risks right now. So that being the case, I don't need to go a long ways. I just need to go far enough to get away from people. And a couple of other considerations are, I want to find a location that has a decent amount of resources in close proximity, namely water. And another criteria this time of year, as it is winter and is cold, is that I want the ability to be able to have a fire. So I want to pick a location that has a good amount of firewood in close proximity. I would also like a location that's fairly well hidden, that can't be seen from a very significant distance. So one of our objectives for this trip is to take a look at the gear and the supplies that we have in the vehicle and figure out exactly how long that would potentially sustain us for. So we won't probably get into that tonight. Tonight will just be about finding a good location, making camp, and getting set up. One thing about this being ready for a bug out is having a change of appropriate clothes in the vehicle. So I keep a bag of clothes in my Jeep all the time that has roughly two complete changes of clothes and a pair of hiking boots. All right, well, I got changed into some more outdoor appropriate clothes, and I'm just starting to work my way up out of the junipers and just starting to get into the first few little pine trees. And I'm going through a section right now where the road that I'm on is a public access road, but there's private land on either side. So this is a really little known kind of road that cuts through this area here. it gets me back into an area country that I think will be just about an ideal location for what we want. So this little road that I'm on gets hardly any traffic, but what I want to do is I want to pull off of it, because what I want is I want to be in a place where I know people can only approach me from one direction. All right, so I've identified the spot that I want to camp at, but now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and run this little 2-track road out for about 1.5 miles, or maybe until it ends, but I want to run it out for about 1.5 miles past this little spot where I'm going to camp, because I just want to verify if there's any other roads connecting into it, which I don't see any on the map, and I also want to make sure there's no other tracks or no other people camping anywhere in close vicinity. All right, this is great. There's no sign of anyone anywhere in this general area here, so I'm pretty stoked about that. So I'm just about back to the place where I'm going to turn off this road and kind of pick myself a little path back to where I want to camp. Okay, so I'm just about to the spot where I'm going to turn off and go to my camp spot up there, but this represents an interesting opportunity right here. There's a little drift of snow that's still here in the shade of these trees, and even though it's well above freezing, there's a good snowpack here in the shade, so this is going to stay here for a while. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a couple of marks in this that are going to give me the ability to be able to come back here and check and see if anybody has passed on this road. So I'm just going to scar up this drift a little bit here. If anybody drives along this road, they won't have any idea what these marks are, but they won't be able to get past this spot without messing up these marks. And even if they melt in a little bit, I'll still be able to tell if someone's driven across them. All right, so here's where I'm pulling off. So I want to go oh so easy and try not to make any more tracks than I absolutely have to. All right, we're almost back to the camp spot. Once I get to the actual spot where we're going to camp, I'll walk back up this and I'll make sure that I didn't leave any too obvious tracks or anything. All right, so I'm pretty satisfied with this spot here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to take a breather. I'm going to look around, drink some water, kind of relax a little bit, think about this spot, what I have to do, and sort of prioritize my list of things to do for the evening. It's 3:45 right now, which means I have about 4 hours or so of light left, probably 3.5 hours of really good light left. So my main priority for today, this afternoon, is just to get my basic camp set up and get settled in for the night. I want to take this first evening in any kind of a bug out scenario or a disaster scenario. It's good to take the time when you have the time to think through, to plan things out. And then at other times when things are moving faster and you don't have that luxury of taking time, but you took that time when you had it in order to plan out what you would do if the situation escalated or the emergency worsened. So what I'm going to think a little bit about first of all is just kind of security, looking back over my tracks, making sure it's not obvious where I'm at, setting up my sleeping, my basic kitchen, my basic camp for the evening. So I'm really happy with this campsite. I've got lots of firewood around, and I've got a good amount of this mountain mahogany, which actually makes really good firewood. A lot of it is standing and dead, so that'll burn without a lot of smoke. So I've got a lot of wood. I've got a good surrounding of trees, but no huge widowmaker trees that are at risk of falling down across my Jeep or my camp. I'm not out in the open where I can be seen for a long ways. I'm kind of on the point of a slope of a little ridge, so there'll be just a slight little breeze coming up it most of the time, which will help dissipate my smoke and carry it away. So Really pleased with this spot here. All right, so since I do have the time, I'm just going to take a quick walk around here, do a little recon, see what kind of tracks are in the area. I'll just walk out about a 1/4 mile circle around camp and just make sure there's not another road or something like that that I'm not aware of. There's nothing on the maps, and I should be out basically in the middle of nowhere. Kind of trying out this new shotgun, or at least new to me. This is a Benelli M3. It's a convertible, so it converts from pump action to semi-auto. I've been wanting one of these shotguns for a long time, and I picked this up from our local chief of police. So chief, thank you. I'm finally getting a chance to ring this thing out in the woods a little bit. Yeah, I'm really liking this area in here. Really nice mahogany thicket in here, and one of the things I like about it is it's nice deep cover. There's openings in here, but then there's really thick places. Also, I'm seeing more and more deer sign in here, so there's quite a bit of movement, quite a bit of deer hanging out in here. So again, if the bug out scenario went for an extended period of time, good hunting right in here, good hunting. Yeah, one of the first little signs of spring. No flowers in here, already budding. Alright, so I told you guys my priorities tonight were basically security and to get my basic camp set up. So I'm going to start doing that now. I'm going to start by building a little fire reflective wall and gathering up a little bit of firewood. I'm not going to need too much of a fire tonight, so I'm not going to worry about building too big of a reflective wall. I can shore everything up tomorrow. And the same with the firewood. I'm not going to worry about gathering my full supply of firewood. I'm just going to gather enough to get me through the evening. Alright, I got a pretty good start on a nice little fire reflective wall, and this is just going to help make my fire more efficient. So now I'm going to gather a little bit of firewood. And just so you guys know, at this point, I am armed like I always am. For me, being armed all the time out here is just the norm. So it's not going to be any different for me in a bug out scenario. Out in the woods, my basic kind of EDC is I'm at least going to have a good knife, a pistol, a lighter, and a flashlight on me at all times. Alright, so I'm going to go gather some firewood, and the nice thing is that I have in my kit all the time now my electric chainsaw. So in a bug out scenario, I don't know how long I'm going to be out here. I'm probably going to conserve the battery, but tonight, just to get myself set up, I'm going to go ahead and use the electric saw to process up some firewood real quick, at least enough to get me through the night. So I'm going to harvest some of this standing dead mahogany here. And one thing is, I'm going to start getting wood quite a ways away from my camp. And that's going to do two things. One, it's going to preserve the resources closest to my camp for if I ever need them in an emergency situation and I can't travel as far from camp. Like if I got injured or I was sick or something like that. So while I'm healthy and I have the energy and the food, I'm going to go far away from camp to gather resources so that I preserve some of the ones close to my camp. The second reason is the less I can disturb the general area right around my camp, the less likely it is that someone will notice my camp. Alright, I got the sawing done, so once again I'm going to utilize this bag to carry some firewood back over to the camp. Just more efficient. I can put a bigger bundle of this firewood in this bag and carry it than I can just in my arms. Alright, so one thing on a bug out situation like this is I'm going to put into practice a little bit more of my woodcraft and bushcraft skills. And the reason why I'm going to do that, like in the instance of building a fire, is because my fire steel will last a lot longer. I'll be able to create a lot more fires with a fire steel than I will with one of my lighters. Also, my lighters are a really positive way of starting a fire. So I want to save those for in emergency situations when maybe I've got frostbite setting in my hands, or I'm wet, or for whatever reason I need to get a fire done really quickly. Those situations are the situations I want to save my lighter for, which I do have in my pocket. And so the rest of the time I'm going to be using my fire steel. So I'm using this Benchmade fire steel. It throws a spark pretty good. And what I've got here is I gathered a variety of different materials from the environment that I'm hoping I'll be able to use to start a fire. So what I'm going to use to catch a spark and get my first flame is some old man's beard or some Spanish moss. This grows around here. The one thing that's important to know about this old man's beard is that this is a lichen, and lichen gathers moisture out of the air. So if there's any moisture in the air at all, like if the relative humidity is high, this stuff will be a little bit damp. Now what you can do is you can just put it in your pocket for an hour or two while you're out working, and that'll generally dry it out nice. Then I've got some knots of pitch. So those don't generally take a spark very well, but once you have a little bit of flame, if you can get them going, they'll burn forever. Then I have some tiny little pieces of wood here. I've got some pine needles, and then I've got a little bit bigger pieces of wood. So I've got all my material staged here to be able to build up the fire that I need. Now, the one thing I would say is the most common mistake I see people making when they're trying to build a fire with spark is, or in adverse conditions, is they don't have enough tinder, kindling, or fuel. You want to make sure you've got enough kindling and enough fuel here to be able to get your flame to the point where it's self-sustaining. So, first of all, let's see if we can get this old man's beard to take a spark. So I like to just create a nice base for my knife and then draw my fire steel back. Okay, there we go. We got some flame. So now I'm going to go with some pine needles. Put a little bit of pitch in there. All right, I think that is going to go. It's going to keep feeding it some smaller stuff, but I'm pretty sure at this point it's self-sustaining. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put up the rooftop tent, and this is going to be super easy. This is this brand new hard shell tent from Free Spirit Recreation, the Odyssey series. Tonight will actually be the first night I've slept in this tent, but the really cool thing about this tent is just how easy it sets up. I've just got a couple of latches to undo. Undo these latches. And now, literally all I have to do is just push the tent up. It's got a gas strut system in it, but it needs a little bit of help. It has to go about halfway up, and then it'll go the rest of the way on its own. Alright guys, I got the my bed set up, and now I'm getting hungry. So like I mentioned earlier, for this first night of the bug out, I'm not going to worry too much about my calories or anything. I'm just going to eat a good meal. I'm going to go ahead and use fuel in my stove to cook it. I'm not going to worry about that. But then tomorrow we're going to do a pretty serious inventory of everything we have, and we're going to start being really calculated about everything that we use. Really like this little stainless steel cube stove. Alright, let's see what we've got here. Obviously, we've got a ton of Mountain House meals. The question is, what do we want to have for dinner? I think I'm going to go with the Mountain House chicken and dumplings. Close that food box back up for the night so no critters get in it. Now this one's the one that has all my cookware and everything in it. Gonna get a pan out, get some water boiling. That guy. I like this little Covea cube stove that I got from Lolo Overland. There we go. One of the issues that I always wrestle with is I basically view my camping setup, my overland setup, also as my bug out setup. The challenge with that is that I'm using the gear all the time. So, you know, unlike a dedicated bug out vehicle or bug out bag where you put all the stuff in it that you've decided that you need and then you leave it alone until the time that you need it, you don't ever have to worry about anything being broken, anything being used up out of it, or anything like that. So, the downside to that, to having dedicated kit that you set up for an emergency and then you never use unless it is an emergency, is you're not necessarily really familiar with that kit. So for me, obviously, I go camping a lot, that all of my overland camping gear I'm extremely familiar with. I can set it up any kind of weather conditions, day, night, pitch black, you name it. I know where every piece of gear is. I know where every supply is, every med kit, everything I need. So, but the downside to basically using my bug out kit all the time is that sometimes there is that potential to use things up and forget to replace them. So for me, that's really a big part of what these bug out runs are about, or these mock bug outs, is just keeping me honest, making sure I'm staying on top of keeping my rig fully stocked. My goal with my vehicle is that at any given time, I've got about 4 weeks worth of supplies in it, meaning that I could sustain out of my vehicle for about 4 weeks. So first glance at my food supply, I don't know if I'm there right now. I may have been slowly dwindling my food supply away, so we'll take a detailed look at it tomorrow and we'll find out exactly how many days worth of food I have here. But all right, got my water boiled. My mountain house is going to reconstitute now. Okay, so here's a pro tip, guys, for your mountain house meals is set it back in the pan of your boiling water, and that'll keep it nice and hot while it's, or at least help it keep it hot for longer while it's reconstituting. So as far as the food situation goes, I don't have any perishable, any fresh food at all. Because of the nature of just bugging out with what I had at the time, basically everything that's in my Jeep, all my food supply is mountain house meals, MREs, freeze-dried stuff, a little bit of canned stuff, things like that. So that's what I got. All right, so I actually decided to do a really quick inventory of my potable water supply on hand tonight. Here's what I have. I have 2 gallon jugs. This one has a little bit out of it. I have about another half gallon in a pan sitting on my camp table over there that I was using to cook. And then I've got about 2 gallons right here in bottles. Then I've got this 20-liter Scepter can right here. So basically I've got about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I've got about 9 gallons of potable water. 1 extra water bottle I already screwed up, and I actually crushed and destroyed another water bottle of these that I drank today. But that's another really important point about the difference between a camping trip and a bug out trip is, as I empty these things of water, I want to save all of these containers. Oh, I just remembered, I do have another 64 ounces of water in my bug out pack, so I have 2 32-ounce Nalgene's full of water in there. Oh, and another 32-ounce Nalgene sitting beside my rear seat in the Jeep. So let's just say altogether I've got about 10 gallons of water. So if I use 2 gallons a day, that's 5 days worth. If I really cut it down, I could probably get by on 1 gallon a day, and that would get me through for 10 days. But the thing is, again, what I want to do is probably, if I was going to be out here in a real bug out situation, I would probably want to go start procuring and boiling water in the next day or 2. In a perfect world, what I would do is keep all of my containers full of potable water as much as possible. So a lot of times I get the question about why, what's the point of bugging out? And I know a lot of people believe that in most disasters, the best thing to do is to bug in and just stay in your home. And I don't disagree with that. I think for the most part, most disasters, the easiest place to weather them is going to be in your home. Now, depending on where you're at and depending on the disaster may actually affect your home, like something like a hurricane or a tornado or something like that. So there are situations where you would have no choice but to bug out of your home. But I think this whole issue that we're having right now with the coronavirus or COVID-19, you have a disease or a sickness that appears to be fairly contagious, that's rapidly sweeping across the country. A rapidly spreading virus is actually a scenario where just taking a couple of weeks vacation time and coming out and camping out in the woods might not be a bad thing to do while you kick back and watch and see how things progress, and maybe a couple weeks is all it takes for it to kind of blow over. Practicing a bug out scenario or not, it's just nice being out here where I don't have to worry about running into anybody. I don't have to worry about getting infected with it. I had a pretty bad flu for the last couple of weeks. I'm finally starting to get a little bit better. So it's just interesting. Life's just kind of in a little bit of a tailspin right now, and we don't really know how long it's going to last. So it's nice for me to be out in an environment where things are predictable, where I'm just out dealing with Mother Nature and the usual set of circumstances. All right, well, I'm snugged up in the rooftop tent. I think it's going to be nice and cozy. The mattress feels pretty comfortable, and while it is a little bit smaller, there is enough room in here for me and all my gear. Yeah, one thing that's cool about this tent is it has this LED light strip up here, which is pretty nice. I just plugged a power pack into it, and it lights it up in here like daylight. I've got this little Cupid heater going, and this thing is absolutely perfect for this tent. I picked up this one from Josh up at Lolo Overland. That has just been the money heater for a rooftop tent. Tomorrow, in the spirit of the bug out, will basically be inventory day. Tomorrow will be the day for me to go through every single piece of gear that I have. So I think I'm going to put a wrap on this first day and get some sleep, guys. For now, Coyote Works out. I'll see you guys for coffee in the morning. Look for part 2 of this video to see the rest of the trip. It should be hanging out on my channel somewhere right next to this one. In part 2 of this video, I do a pretty complete inventory of all of my kit and kind of figure out how long it would actually sustain me for in a bug out scenario. It also ends up being the most comprehensive look at all of the gear that I carry in my Jeep, I think, that I've ever done on my channel. I appreciate all of your support, look forward to seeing your comments, and I'll see you guys for part 2. Coyote Works, out.